Here at Wind Talk Radio, as Judeo-Christians in America, we have three choices. We can either fight, we can support the fighters, or we can do nothing. We encourage you all, take a stand today.
Well, welcome back to Wind Talk Radio. We're really excited that you all are joining us today. We have an incredible segment today that we want to share with you. You know that we will be bringing a lot of different topics to you that are very important for the time of today. And today we do have an incredible guest. Her name is Jen Reelitz, and she is not only with the Timothy Initiative, she's the Florida director of the Timothy Initiative, but most importantly, she's a mom of 4 and she is a wife. And she is going to be talking to us today about how to prepare. And we're going to be talking a lot of different topics of preparing, but today it's going to be about food forestry. So I just really want to introduce you all to Jen Reelitz, who's an incredible, godly woman, which is most important, but also she is full of knowledge and just resources, and I'm just so excited for you all to hear what Jen has to say today. But we also have, of course, our co-host, Jannique Stewart, and we have Cari Campos, and then we also, of course, Debbie Healy is always part of our co-host. But today we have Jen here visiting us, and we're just so excited, Jen, that you're here. And I'd like you to just tell us first a little bit about yourself.
Sure.
Just who you are, tell our audience, because I'm actually very excited that we're finally on our Google podcast. We are on Spotify. We are on our website, womenimpactingthenation.org. And so we're just start sharing everything that you see, liking us, and just come and join us, because we have a lot of incredible things to say for such a time as this. Lesman Hazeh. So Jen, tell us a little bit about you, and then I'd like to know why we need to be prepared.
Sure. Sue, thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here. My name is Jen. I have 4 little boys. We live in Jupiter Farms, Florida. We actually moved there because we wanted more land. And I work with the Timothy Initiative. It's a disciple-making church planting organization. Very passionate about the country and freedom. And like many of you, I have a husband who is standing against this vaccine mandate. And so he and many of the men from his corporation are waiting to see how the chips fall, but we trust the Lord no matter what. And I think that a function of being prepared for uncertain times is being able to take care of yourself and your family with no outside support. And so, you know, the advent of the grocery store is actually kind of a new thing. It was post-World War II that supermarkets, you know, began to be built, and most people were using them. Prior to that, for most of human history, people were growing their own food. They knew how to produce things for themselves. And so I think we can see from 2020 to even the current supply chain issues today that these supply chains are much more fragile than we thought that they were.
For sure.
And then at the same time, you know, come vaccine passport or whatever, your ability to get into a supermarket could be cut off. So I think it's really important not only to have enough food in your home to take care of yourself for a few months, but once that food storage runs out, how do you do it in perpetuity? I think because I have young children, I think about this a lot. It's not the government's job to feed my kids. It's not Publix or the grocery store chain's job to feed my kids. It's my job. I'm their mother. And so I think it's also just, again, for me, a function of stewardship. You know, God calls us to be stewards of all the resources we're given. I think that includes land. And for me, you know, the average American yard is full of grass or sod, which is, I'm going to joke and say it's the most useless agricultural product we could possibly produce. It does nothing. It costs money to install, to cut, to water, and it makes nothing. So there's this idea, people call it different things. Some people call it permaculture, agroforestry, you know, food forest, edible landscaping. I don't care what you call it, because for me, this is not an academic exercise. This is a practical one. So I want to be able to produce enough food that if there were any kind of issue, I could feed my family.
That's amazing. And you know, you said that you're responsible for taking care of yourself first. And what happens if you're on an airplane? What do they say? If you know there's loss of oxygen or whatever, the first thing that comes down is that you know that mask. And what does it say? Put it on yourself first, then you take care of others. You can't take care of others if you can't take care of yourself, right? So that's really awesome. You know, Jannique or Cari, do you guys want to you know jump in with that? Well,
I do have one question, but I also thought that it was really interesting that you said that it's not the government's responsibility to feed. Whereas I think in our current society, sadly, I do think that most people think that it's the government's responsibility to take care of people when it isn't.
Right.
So I kind of want to hear a little bit more about what is a food forest and even how is it different than, for example, a garden, or are they the same thing?
Sure. No, they're not the same.
Okay.
So a food forest, the idea of a food forest is let's mimic nature. If you were to go out into a state park, you would see beautiful, you know, canopy trees, small trees, bushes, shrubs, ground covers, what they call an herbaceous layer, vines. And in your state parks, there's no gardener, there's no irrigation, there's no maintenance. This is all self-sustaining, self-maintaining. So can we take that forest system and implement it on our own property, in our own yards, whether we have a small space or a large space, and implement all those same canopy trees, small trees, bushes, ground covers, vines, tubers growing in the ground, and have it all be producing food. Now, you know, your raised bed gardens are typically annual vegetables. You have to, you know, plant them at a certain time of year and harvest them at a certain time of year, and people tend to want to maintain them and have them look pretty. The idea of a food forest is focusing primarily on perennial vegetables that produce year-round with very little maintenance.
Oh wait, give us an example. For most of us who are unfamiliar, when you say perennials, what do you mean by that?
Well, it depends on your zone. Okay, so if you're in the northern zone, you're talking, now I'm in a tropical zone. So for me, a perennial vegetable would actually be what in Mexican cuisine is called nopales. It's prickly pear cactus. The pads of a prickly pear cactus can be chopped up and used as green pepper in cooking. It tastes just like green pepper with a hint of lemon. It's drought tolerant. It takes literally no maintenance.
Wow.
And most of your Americans would think it's just a cactus. So often in food forest, I'm growing things that maybe you haven't heard of, you haven't tried before, and I think that's a good thing. Because if we came to a time where people were hungry and you have a raised bed that's full of tomatoes and lettuce, that's identifiable to most people as food. But if you were to come take a look at my Egyptian spinach, my edible hibiscus, my katuk, you wouldn't know what it was. You wouldn't know that it was food. You wouldn't know how to use it. I actually think that's all to the benefit of the person who's growing it, that my food forest looks a little wild. There are some wild plants, you might call them weeds, mixed in there, but a lot of those wild plants are edible, medicinal, nitrogen fixing, pollinators. So it's just getting to back in touch with creation. And you know, really when you get into foraging, and especially herbalism, which is using plants to make medicine, you'll find that the predominant people who are involved in that are New Agers who are using it for the purposes of darkness, right? But I feel like creation belongs to God, right? So I'm not going to seed this ground, I'm not going to seed this territory, because creation belongs to God. He made all these plants for us to literally use as medicine. If you were to go strip the bark of a willow tree and taste it, you'd be like, oh, this tastes like aspirin. That's because they use willow bark to make aspirin. So there's so much medicine and food available. We've just lost touch with the art of how to find it, how to use it, because we've become dependent on this system that I think it would be wise for us to begin to lessen that dependence.
You know, it's amazing because I've been at Jen's house, and she said, oh, you want to, you know, she had her little boys running around and everything, and they're all little. And she goes, oh, you want to take a look at my garden? Or I don't know how you put it. I said, yeah, sure, I'd love to do that. And my husband is really into all that. I'm not. To me, I look at a garden, I just want everything in a row. All the things, you know, it's like, you know, everybody is aesthetic. You look at it, it's like, oh, it's got to be pretty. Well, I went out there, and I have to be real honest. I thought, wow, this looks like a mess, and I don't mean it. And I don't mean it in a bad way. I just like it looks like weeds, and you mentioned it. It's wild, and I really did. I thought, well, where's all the stuff? And she's showing me what she has. I was beyond blown away. That's why I was so excited, and that's why I think it's important that everybody knows what you're doing, because you need to do a class to do all this. But I really, what I want to do is I want to come back to talk about what your garden, your forest, food thing look like, and I really want to tell everybody what I saw, because I was just blown away from that. But what we're going to do is we're going to come back on our next segment, and just remember to go to womenimpactingthenation.org, or you can go to 844-946-8255, and you can email us, call us with questions that you have on different topics that we've had, and we'll try to answer everything that, good or bad. We want all the different questions, because when we're here at WIN, we talk truth and we take action, but most importantly, it's all about truth and facts, not emotion, not conjecture, and we're going to stir the pot here and get you to think. So we'll be right back.
At WIN Talk Radio, we talk truth so we can take action. And whenever I think of what that means, I really think of the sons of Issachar in 1 Chronicles 12, where it says they understood the times and they knew what they should do. I think right now in our country, most people, they don't understand the times, therefore they don't know what they should do. To really understand the times that we're in is to recognize, number one, that truth is under assault. And because truth is under assault, it impacts our moral compass. Our moral compass is shaken up, it's broken, kind of like a snow globe. And ultimately what we see going on is life. There is a complete reckless disregard for human life. When we can kill the unborn to the tune of almost 1 million every single year, that should give every single one of us great pause. And that's not just some people's issue, that is every single one of our issue. Because the most important, inalienable right that we have is the right to life. But it isn't just life that's under assault. Our religious freedom and liberties are under assault. Even when it comes to just the idea of truth, when children are being taught that you can choose your sex, or that there are over 100 different genders, or maybe when our children are being taught about critical race theory and that every single white person is a racist, because this whole idea that racism is everywhere at all times, and that there are those who are oppressed and those that are the oppressors. We need to understand the times and we need to know what to do. You see, that also means that they understood action was required. We have a moral responsibility, a moral obligation to not just talk about it, to not just complain, but to also take action. That's why at WIN, we talk truth so we can all take action.
Well, welcome back to our segment on being prepared, and we are talking with Jen Reelitz, and we are just really excited about what she's saying. We are learning so much. But in the last segment, I was starting to talk about how I went to Jen's house and looked at her forest and what I thought was her garden that I thought was going to be perfectly in a row, like we all think what a garden looks like. But it was just like, it looked to me like weeds. But as we were walking around her entire house, yard, it was amazing, because she's going, well, look at here, this is where I have my pumpkins, my squash, my beans, my this, my that, and I was just blown away. And what's really exciting is, her little boys are all running around, and they're from 7 under? 7 under, she's got 3, and one's in heaven, and so, but she lets them go out and decide what they're going to have for dinner. And so they're picking beans and all sorts of stuff. And I'm going to let her tell you what they do. But I do want to ask, Jen, why is it that, because I know you told me why it's better that it looks like weeds, so for the other people to come in, that number one. Number two is, okay, and number two is, why don't you do it in rows? What is, just for those two questions first.
So you want to create a happy microclimate. So for example, banana trees, or banana plants, we're going to call them, are very susceptible to wind and cold. So if they're out in a field on their own and it gets to be under 50 degrees, they're going to get damaged by the cold. But if there's a lot of plants growing around them that serve as a windbreak and some cold protection, they're going to do better. Same thing is true with starfruit. There are other trees that just don't do well with cold and wind. And so the more that you have kind of a dense like forest environment, the happier everything is. So it can be a very symbiotic relationship where certain, bean plants are nitrogen fixers. So they're putting fertilizer into the soil, which is feeding the other plants, right? And again, the other reason that I don't grow in rows is just if times got hard and people were hungry. If you're farming in rows or you have raised beds, that's very easily identifiable as food. But if you're growing in a more wild forest type environment,
People
you'll
will come
have
onto
to
your
know what you're
property
doing.
and see it, whereas if they see it looks like weeds and it's just like, oh, they don't think
have
it's
no
food,
idea what it is.
and they just leave you alone.
Yeah.
I remember you saying that to me. I was
Yeah.
like, wow.
Yeah.
I
That's
have a quick
amazing.
question.
Yeah.
This is a deal breaker for me.
Okay.
Do you grow Skittles?
No.
Just kidding. That's not my question. That's not my question.
I do grow coffee though.
Yes, Jesus.
Yeah.
What made you what was the introduction to the passion for this? Did you grow up like this? Because I would imagine most people, I would say you're probably my age, growing your own food wasn't a thing when we were
Right.
kids. So how did you get introduced to this passion?
Sure. So I've always loved gardening and loved the idea of making my land productive, right? So my idea with trees is like produce or die, right? Like I really want everything to be productive. So for a while I was just planting fruit trees and having your normal vegetable garden growing in rows. I had a friend, Heather Dorsey, who was doing edible landscaping. So she lives in El Cid, which is a beautiful neighborhood in West Palm Beach. It's right on the Intercoastal. And she was, these are all $1 million homes. She was transforming her yard, all of those kind of hedge plants that contractors put in, digging all those up and putting in, hedges that produce something like a cherry or, food producing things. So she began to introduce me to the idea that we may need to start growing food. Then I'm very much self-taught. So in the middle of nursing babies and being awake in the middle of the night, I was listening to YouTube videos on food forest and how to start a food forest in a tropical zone and just reading, taking notes and learning everything I could.
Wow, that's powerful.
Well, if you can't come up with a Skittle plant, then Carrie's going to be on it.
Girl. Me too.
you're
And
a
I
Skittle-
think,
you're a
I
Skittle-
love Skittles. I should. I think I love them. I love them way too much. Yes, they're not my friend, but
You don't like Good and Plenty's?
What?
I've never even heard of. She keeps talking about to our viewers. She loves something called Good and Plenty. I've never even heard of it. She ate an entire box, I guess, of
See, now
Good
Debbie-
and Plenty.
Yeah, one of our other co-hosts is off the set right now, and she's not real happy with me, and we'll have to talk about the Good and Plenty.
Oh, good times.
But go ahead.
I'm good. I was just going to say it's super powerful because I think that's almost also the testimony of the Lord when you learn kind of on your own and you don't have somebody teaching you. It's so much more powerful when you do it on your own and you let the Lord impart it into you. And I just thought that was super powerful.
Sure. Plus, I also think that she's teaching the next generation
Yeah.
the importance and the relevance of this as well,
Right.
and your whole community. But I do have another question that I think, in my mind, what I'm thinking is, well, how, if you have this wonderful food forest, I would think that the animals are like, ooh, yummy. So how do you keep deer and other animals from coming in to eat it because it's tasty?
Sure. I would say just have enough. And also, if you have a deer problem specifically, I don't have deer, but I have bunnies and squirrels and all kinds of other things. Plant food for the deer. So there's lots of ways that you can, depending on how much land you have, go out and scatter seed with plants that deer enjoy, because obviously at some point deer would also be a food source. So you'd want them to be comfortable coming by your property. But I think the key is simply having enough. And again, when you're not planting everything in one place, if you plant it in a row and the rabbits find your row, then it's all gone. But if you have it kind of planted everywhere, they might get
work
some
to get
here,
it, yeah.
but they're not going to get it over there. And I was going to say, besides just teaching my children, I've also been doing community workshops and food forest tours, trying to teach all of my neighbors, ladies from church, other folks, how to grow their own food. Because I think if a neighborhood or a community becomes self-sustaining, it makes everyone safer. So am I doing it out of the goodness of my heart? Yes. But is it also out of self-preservation? Yes. Because if times got hard, it would be the folks in your close proximity who would be interested.
Well, and then it's also awesome because I think that we need to come together to, like, if you're growing a lot more beans and you're growing a lot more that whatever, that we can kind of barter too. And I think that's another thing that we, you know, we'll talk on a different segment about that. But, you know, so we don't have to go down to Target. I said, you know what, I've got this. And then we're really kind of doing what really God, you know, God's called us to do from way back when. We've just we've so dumbed down and we've lost so much of what God's given us. And I think with everything that's happening today, I think people are starting to realize this, and I think more and more people are paying attention, you know, to what you're doing. And I mean, I'm excited about this because when I literally saw your little boys, I mean, the one little one was climbing up one of the, you know, one of the trestles or something, and he was trying to get something. And it was so cool how Jen was just letting her boys do that. That's what boys do, or even little girls. What's the big deal? Go out but they were, you know, getting the little tomatoes and the, you know, and then you did have, now, you obviously can't do this in a, and I'd like to talk about this in the next segment about what do you do if you live in the city, or what do you do if you don't have a whole lot of land? How do you do that? But you also have some chickens, and they lay eggs, and so that's kind of cool. Like we have a home where we have, you know, in North Carolina, and we have some friends that do the chickens and everything. And we were just with them about a month or so ago, and the gal said, "Well, Sue, we've got eggs, so why don't you just come over?" I said, "Well, we'll be glad to pay for them." She goes, "No, we just give them away." So that's where the barter system can come in. It's like if you're a good mechanic, you know, then hey, look, I'll take care of your car, and you just give me eggs and beans. I mean, just bartering with that. But so when we come back, I'd like you to talk to us about what do we do if we have smaller homes, if we, you know, don't, or if apartment or whatever. But then also how to plant things that are not just, like you said, you know, people are right now going to the store and they're getting beans and rice and all this kind of stuff. But you said something about getting beans that you can plant. So I want you to talk about that. And then I think we do have some questions that have come in, you know, from, you know, different people. And so we'd like to have you, you know, answer those questions. But so we'll be right back, and remember you can go to 844-946-8255 and go to womenimpactingthenation.org, and please, you know, follow us on the different media outlets that we have, and from Spotify to Google to, I don't even know all the places. Would I say iTunes? I don't even know everything we're on, but if you go to our website, womenimpactingthenation.org, you'll be able to find us and hear all the different episodes there that we have. And so we'll be right back.
At Win Talk Radio, our heart is to encourage people and give them hope. As Christians and conservatives, we spend so much time focusing on the negative and what the left is doing and what the Democrats are doing, when the reality is God is moving powerfully, and we see it everywhere we go. He's waking up people, opening their eyes to the truth. And so the very reason, or the very thing that we see as a negative, that the media is not showing us the positive proves that we are winning the day. And so we just want to encourage you to take a stand, take a fight, speak boldly, because people are listening and God is opening eyes. And so the reality is when we show up, we win, and God will win the day through his people when we do it together in unity.
Well, welcome back to our segment on being prepared. And we've been talking about a lot of different things about the food forest, but also, you know, it's amazing how some politicians and some people out there literally think that we don't need farming, we don't need any of that because we can just go to the grocery store. Now, think about that. We don't need we don't need farming because we get everything from the grocery store. Well, where does the grocery store get all that stuff? So what we want to do is talk, I know that Jannique has some questions. We want to come from a biblical perspective, and number one, the urgency, and also, Jen, during our break here, you were talking about Joseph and being prepared and why he was prepared. So let's talk about that. Jannique, why don't you start with those questions?
I have a question just about why is there an urgency for this right now? And what are some of the biblical principles that we see that tell us that we need to be prepared? Are there any examples of that you can refer to us?
Sure. So I think if you know Revelation, and you know prophecy, then we understand that believers could possibly, depending on where we are in the timeline, heading into a time of increasing persecution, increasing spirit of the Antichrist. We can already see how much Christians are, increasingly hated. But there's a period of time where believers will not be able to buy and sell. We don't know how far off that is. Is that decades away? Is that 5 years away? Is that next year? We don't know. But Joseph didn't wait until the famine to start storing up food. Joseph took the years of plenty and he stored up food then. So I think the question I have is God calling some of us to be Josephs for our neighborhood? And that doesn't necessarily mean, vaccine passport, we can't get into a grocery store. It could also just be inflation and people can't afford to buy food and they're being fired because they won't take the vaccine. And, I just think it's wise to be able to take care of yourself, to feed your own family, to not be dependent on the supermarket. Because as you were saying, some people think that we shouldn't be farming. Not only that, but there are some environmental agendas that I think are very anti-farming.
Yeah, speak about that.
Yeah.
Right
please.
now,
What do you mean?
the U.S. Department of Agriculture has been buying up tens of thousands of acres of land in Nebraska and other parts of the country. They've been paying farmers 1.5 times the value of their crops to turn under their crops. And they can't destroy their crops using chemicals. They have to destroy their crops using environmentally friendly ways of literally turning under their crops. And there is a environmental movement coming where I think we'll see increasingly people talking about a climate change crisis and wanting to take farmed land and saying we've been destroying the land, we've been destroying the soil. Now, to some degree, there's some merit to that conversation, but they're going to say, what we're going to do? We're going to rewild the land. We're going to take land that's currently being used to produce food, and we're going to let it convert back into forest because we want to protect the environment. And so you could
Deception.
see, yes, you could see if you were going to plan a famine, you would wind up, doing something.
Wow, but why would the government want to do that? And why are they paying farmers to destroy their crops?
That's a great question. There are actually hundreds of farmers you can look it up on YouTube, who are asking this question. They don't know why, but they're literally showing you the USDA letters with all the instructions on how they're supposed to destroy the crops.
So this isn't just impacting a small group of farmers. You're saying
Hundreds
this
of
is
farmers.
impacting hundreds of them.
farmers.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I mean, obviously, this is really very well planned. This wasn't just happened.
No.
They use a lot of words, and we've talked about this on other segments, on how words matter. Things are, they're deceiving, and yet they make things sound good, and anything if it sounds good, we've always talked about it's a big red flag, right?
Yeah.
And so we have to be very careful, and we really pray on, when we get together, we pray about all of you all that are listening to have discernment and wisdom and knowledge of that, asking the Lord for that wisdom and discernment, and not be fearful because when all this comes on and you get the farmers and everything else and they're going to give you money, well, gosh, I better take the money and run. Well, wait a minute. Let's step back a little bit. Let's not react. Let's think about this and look at the bigger picture. And I believe, this is my personal opinion, my humble opinion, but I really believe that, and I think it's kind of factual, really, but but this is really very, very well planned because they're trying to turn us into a Marxist, socialist, communist agenda.
Yeah.
And then getting fear, everybody's fear-filled. And, the Lord says 365 times, do not fear. One for every time of the year. Faith and fear cannot coexist. Hence, that's why I am wearing my shirt today. It says faith over fear. And so we have got to have that faith. Are we really, really trusting God? And then learning, but learning, getting educated with truth and facts, not emotion, not conjecture, but getting just prepared on what you're doing.
Did you see the
it's
news
amazing.
story yesterday? There was a news story yesterday about strikes at the John Deere factory. Okay, so when you add it all together, there's a historic drought in the American West. There are supply chain problems. Now we're having strikes at the John Deere factory. They're going to have a lot of plausible deniability as to why there are food shortages. So I think honestly, they're if you were planting articles.
Wow.
Yeah. They're literally telling us to prepare without telling us to prepare.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, Kamala Harris came out and said, buy your Christmas presents early.
yeah.
They're telling you to prepare without telling you. And again, I really think it's all about control. We know, we know honestly that in the world there is a demonic agenda to control the world.
Yes, but there also is a spiritual principle. We see all throughout Scripture that we are to prepare, that we are to be prepared, we're to be ready.
Yes.
And the other aspect of that is we have to be discerning.
Yes.
And we have to think wisely, but we also have to allow the Holy Spirit, when He's knocking on our hearts, when He's giving us that nudge, then we need to go and respond and listen. Wherever He's telling us to do, we need to heed. So that might be, for some of you, you have already perhaps you've had that nudge that maybe you need to do something. Well, maybe this food forest is exactly where God is leading you, and He's maybe encouraging you to do that. So what would be some practical steps that someone can do? Are there a couple of things that they need to do in preparation to have that food forest, so that if something does happen, if and when, shall I say, probably when, they're ready?
Yes. I would say step number one is educate yourself.
Okay.
Get your hands on some books, on some websites, on some videos, on growing in your area. Again, if you're in the tropical zone, my favorite YouTubers, because I'm a mom, like YouTube is how I listen while I'm taking care of little kids. David the Good, Pete Canaris, Green Dreams. There are a lot of great guys who are making phenomenal shows on how to do this. Get your hands again on some books, some websites, educate yourself. Step number two would be figure out whether your property is a place where you could do that. I think we are seeing a great migration of folks out of the cities, out of New York, out of California. I think people have this kind of feeling in their gut, you know, that we should maybe get some land, try to be self-sufficient. But even in a small yard, identifying space where you want to grow, making the land ready, again, as we said, you know, killing the grass, putting down mulch, and then installing the staple crops. Staple crops are potatoes, beans, bananas, the calorie crops that really could help you, you know, make it.
Very good. Very good. So we'll have that on the website then.
Yes, what we're going to do is we will have on this episode, we will have the different things that, and maybe Jen will be able to give our resource side. That'll be great. And maybe even some recipes.
And some pictures and everything. Yes, sure.
But, you know, we just thank you all for joining us on our Wind Talk Radio. And we really want to give you hope. I mean, in the big scope of things, things seem to be very dark and everything else, but there is always hope. And I just want to have you all, I want to look at you all in the eyes and just say that you are not alone. I promise you, you can call WIN 844-946-8255. You can go to our website, womenimpactingthenation.org, and we are all in. We are here for you. We know that this is a spiritual battle, and for those of you that maybe don't really understand all of that, that's okay for now. You can call us. We're here for you, but we want you to know that you are not alone. There is so much hope. And we're here for such a time as this. We get to be here, and so we get to, you know, meet, you know, gals like Jen who are, you know, teaching us, educating us, and you know, our co-hosts, you know, from Debbie to Jannique and Cari, they're amazing, and we all have. We just want to just impart to you that there are people out there. We're all in the same boat. Sometimes we can roll harder than you, sometimes you can roll harder than us. But we're all in this together, and we're going to stand, we're going to hold the line, and we're going to resist because, you know, if God is for you, nobody can be against you. And so just remember, when we show up, we win. And there was only 12 disciples, only 56 signers, and only one Savior/Messiah. We don't need a gazillion people. One woman took out prayer and Bible out of the school. What can we all do together with Christ who strengthens us? And nothing is impossible with Him. Well, welcome back to one of our segments to being how to be prepared in a food forest, and we're here with Jen Reelitz, and we've been talking about how do we just grow different things, and I know that Jannique has a couple of questions, and I know Cari does.
Yes,
So
I do.
Okay, go
Because
get
I'm
it.
thinking, okay, so what if I really want to get engaged with this and I really want to start? Where would I start? Like, what would be the first couple of things that you would tell me to do? Like, even if I have small space, but second, are there some crops that you would consider maybe survival crops and maybe others that aren't? So what would you recommend? How would I start?
Okay,
Because I might actually start.
Those are a couple of questions there. So the general rule when you're growing, figure out your north-south orientation. You're going to grow your tallest fruit trees on the north side, and you're going to get your best sun exposure on the south side. Now, if your property doesn't adhere to those rules, it's all a square, find some sun, grow something. But in general, it's the way the shade falls. So if I'm going to plant a tree that is 50 feet tall and a tree that will become 20 feet tall, I want to put the 50 behind the 20 so that it's not shading, right? So that's why you plant your tall trees on the north side. Okay. Then your second question, even in a small space, how do I identify where to grow? Again, you just want to kind of observe your land. Where is the sun? Where is the shade? Are there areas when it rains where it gets wet and stays wet? Just observe your property. Once you figure out a section where you think, okay, I think this would be a good spot, the question is it bare dirt there, or is there sod or grass? If there is sod or grass, I highly recommend killing the grass, because you want to be able to grow lots of other things there.
I can do that easily.
Yes, great. Well,
That's my gift.
Is that a gift? Is that a skill set?
Yeah. Well, my method for killing the grass is typically putting down a tarp or something to cover the grass for about a month, waiting for it to die. Then covering it with cardboard, then covering it with mulch, because cardboard will decompose and turn back into soil. Of course, if you're using cardboard from your local, liquor store, wherever, you do want to pull off tape. Like anything that has plastic, you want to pull it off before you lay it down. Because I'm on a 2-acre property, I have areas where I'll decide this will be now food forest. We lay down cardboard. I have a local landscaper come bring me a dump of mulch. You can get free mulch on chipdrop.com. You can also just call your local landscape companies and ask them.
Can you remind everyone, what was that again?
Chipdrop.com.
Chipdrop.com.
Is how you can get free mulch. Also, just call your local landscape companies. These landscape companies, if they have wood chips, they have to pay to dump them. They don't want to do that. They'd much rather bring them to you for free and a truckload of free mulch. So the reason that mulch is so important is that mulch does 3 things. Mulch suppresses weeds, it retains moisture, and it builds biomass. Depending on where you live in the country, that's really important. If in Florida we've got sandy soils, other places have clay soils. So if you put down a 6-inch layer of mulch, within a year or 2, that's going to be nice black dirt. And that's what your plants need to grow and thrive. Again, even in a small space, in the tropical zone, things that produce a lot of food in a small space would be things like papaya. You can grow hundreds of pounds of food in a very small space. Even if you don't like papaya fruit, which honestly I don't, you can use it green to pickle. Asians make like a green papaya salad that's amazing. I just had it last week. It's so good. But the staple crops, I think it's really important to focus on your survival crops.
Yes.
Those
What are
would be your calorie crops. So your calorie crops are things like potatoes, beans in a tropical zone, bananas, things like lettuce and tomatoes. They're condiments, they're nice to have. They have about 30 calories. That's not going to sustain a person. Potatoes, again, beans. If you have chickens, you've got eggs. Those are the things that you would really need.
Just don't make your chickens pets, because then...
If you need to eat your chickens. Also, let me mention really quickly that in a tropical zone, Americans have a hard time because we envision what we see in the grocery store. Okay? There's about 10,000 edible plants. Only 200 are cultivated for commercial production, and they're not cultivated because they're the most delicious or the most nutritious. They're the most commercially convenient to pack and ship. That apple that you bite into, many of them are almost a year old. We're talking about fruit that is picked green and then gassed to ripen. So anyway, because Americans are used to white potatoes in a tropical zone, they're like, well, we can't grow potatoes. There are about 5 varieties of root crops that I'm growing. Things like yucca, cassava, malanga, taro, true yams, purple ubi, African potato mint. There are even canna lilies that have edible roots that taste like a potato. So there's lots of things that you can do. I would say just start looking into it. Look at food forestry in your zone. And if there are people in your neighborhood, in your local area who are growing food forests, go see them. One of the best ways to start a food forest for free is knowing someone else who's doing it, because many of these plants can be grown from a cutting. So if you come to my house and you see this edible hibiscus and it tastes really good and it looks really good, I can just clip you off a branch, say take it home, stick it in a pot, you have a free plant.
I think we'll be at your house later.
Yeah.
I think we all will. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
But I also think that we're probably going to end up doing a second show about this, and I think maybe she'll bring some visuals and different things so we can see, and even maybe we might even have
Eat
one where we have Skittles for dessert, but then we'll also have where she'll maybe show us how to cook with some of those things, or little dishes, or like even how to make a little salad with some of that, because I do think that sometimes people want to eat healthy, but they don't know how, or they're getting bored with the exact same thing because that's really all that's available. So I feel like you're bringing in so much variety. And the other aspect of that is God has given us so much that I feel we have no clue all the different, like even when you're talking about a cactus, I had no idea that could be edible. So that's also really interesting that we're, in my opinion, it's almost like you're becoming such a good steward of the natural resources that God has gifted us with.
Amen.
Yeah.
I have a quick question, because my mind goes to the north right away because I'm from Minnesota. So like, obviously they grow completely different things. So do they have to do the whole thing where they grow and then they store? Like is that what there is?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
if you're in a northern zone, that's why canning would be critical, because the growing season is much shorter because of winter. Gratefully, in a tropical zone, our growing season is practically year round.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how, because right now everybody goes into the organic, and a lot of times we're deceived about how organic,
It's just
and
a
it's more
marketing ploy.
it's a market
Yeah.
exactly, Cari, and it's like. I mean, we're deceived.
Yes.
We really are deceived, and it's more expensive.
Yes.
And that's why it's like this is so. I mean, I'm just so excited. I'm like going to call my husband and say, "Okay, do that." Notice I said I'm going to call my husband.
Definitely.
No, but I would really like to know how to do that. I mean, more and more, because I'm just. The first time I went to your house, I talked about you so much, Jen, because I'm like, you ought to see her house. It is phenomenal, and I don't even know how to explain it. So I think with what you said, Jannique, is that we will put up some pictures of what it looks like, because I think people are visual. I know I'm very visual, right? But also, I think would be really good too is we're going to be having a blog, and also I think that that we can put up some recipes of what you just said, because you said so. If since you already said you've already done your what was it
Cassava?
Well, cassava, I love cassava. Yucca, I love all that kind of stuff. But no, you said a papaya.
Yeah, sure.
So maybe you can make a papaya. So
Salad.
we'll have you come back on, and we're going to have a tasting here. Whoever's sitting back here gets.
I think
taste.
so. Yeah.
Sure.
Poor Debbie.
Yeah.
I
I'm
have
saying
one
that
last
because
question.
our co-host Debbie, she's awesome. But there's 4 of us here, and I just said that just because we want to have fun here, because I know a lot of our other segments, everything's been very serious, and we kind of looked at each other and said, "Wow, we're really serious on these sets," but we're grieved. We're very grieved, and when the spirit is grieved, we can't just smile and everything is happy. But we're trying to make this fun and have things here, even though this is very serious. But I just so thank you, Jen, for coming today, for taking the time to come. And she drove 45 minutes just to be on our set today. And we're just thrilled and we really want to have you back, because I know that people are going to start asking questions, about what do we do, how do we do it, and we want to answer all of that. So I just thank you so much for coming today.
Thanks
and
for having me.
Oh my gosh, you're amazing, and I don't know, I learned a whole lot.
Yeah,
Did you?
for sure.
You know?
I also have 3 boys, so I'll have to set up things for them to climb up and do.
Well, you know what would be really awesome, since you're homeschooling, right, Cari?
Yeah.
You really, and I'm not kidding, you need to go on a field trip, and it's not that far from
Botany
you.
class.
Okay, a
Yes,
botany
right,
class.
yeah.
Absolutely. And wilderness survival. I used to have camps, and one of our hour, 2-hour classes was wilderness survival. And I think that would be really
Yeah,
cool
that
because
would be
I'm telling you,
amazing.
your boys would love to go see what she has, and then it would be cool for your 3 little boys to have, because they're a little bit
Yeah.
older, and I think it would be a really awesome connection and
Yeah.
just even mentoring and all that kind
yeah,
of neat
that'd
thing.
be amazing.
So,
I
but
don't have
anyway,
any children. I have a dog.
Okay.
that's okay. But you know what? But what's really awesome about Jannique is that she may not have children right now, but she literally talks to over 100,000 kids a year on very important things. So we all have, our time and our contributions here. So again, we want to thank you for joining us on one of the segments on being prepared in the food forestry, and we thank Jen again for joining us. And please go to 844-946-8255 or go to womenimpactingthenation.org and check us out. Like our pages, like our podcasts, and just share them, and just come on board, because remember, when we show up, we win. But we also talk truth and we take action. And this is one way to take action. So we'll see you next time.
Yeah. Great job.
Really.